Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. On this show, we talk about everything Kickstarter, Indiegogo, WeFunder, equity crowdfunding, Start Engine even, right? We talk about a lot of stuff, occasionally cover charity and like nonprofit fundraising, but kind of the whole goal and the whole reason why I do this show is just to introduce you to new people and new topics and new ways of doing things and new strategies that are working and new resources and tools, right? The goal with this show is like at the end of a class, I call it, or at the end of a podcast, you feel like you learned something and you feel like you can apply that thing. It wasn't nails on a chalkboard in order to get there, right? It wasn't boring. It wasn't too annoying. Like you actually took away some good stuff. That's kind of my goal with these shows. So I've been doing the podcast since 2015. I did my blog since 2012. Started my YouTube channel around, I think, 2016 or so. And I really love it. You know, I love teaching. I love doing stuff like that. You can check me out on my website, crowdcrux.com. That's my main hub, the crux, right, if you will, of crowdfunding, crowdcrux.com. But that's really been my life's work, and you can always get in touch with me there. One of the things I want to talk about today is like, what do you have to do in terms of creating a product? What should you know about when it comes to Kickstarter? So we talked about Orb One, the Stovetop Coffeemaker on Kickstarter. This is a campaign that was super successful, really insane. They've been able to raise over $300,000 for this thing. Really great, more than 2,500 backers. You're going to discover tons of secrets and tricks with this episode, insider stuff you might not know about as well when it comes to product design. But there's tons of more stuff that I'd love to share with you. You know about my book probably already, the Kickstarter Launch Formula, available on Amazon. The other new thing I'm doing is my mastermind, which is sort of an insider's club or an insider's community where you can get access to stuff I'm not sharing anywhere else with regards to guides and checklists and templates and my Friday workshops that I do live. All this kind of stuff you can get access to in my insiders community. This is, again, a mastermind group. And if you're going to be joining, just keep in mind that this is designed to be a learning environment. So you're going to be learning a ton, my friend, but it's also going to really speed up the time it takes for you to do one of these campaigns. And also you'll get a lot more support, which is at the end of the day, one of the reasons why I wanted to have it is like more hand-holding, more support in this industry. That's what we need. If you believe that as well, go and check it out at crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That link is crowdcrux.com/mastermind, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. Hope you enjoy it. But that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get now into the Orb One Stovetop Coffeemaker, a unique stovetop coffee maker that gives you the ability to brew delicious coffee across a variety of brew styles. This campaign raised, again, over 2,500 backers, more than $386,000 that's raised, and you're going to discover how they did it in today's podcast episode. This podcast episode is sponsored by the Gadget Flow. The Gadget Flow reaches over 28 million people, and they've been around since 2012. They are Indiegogo and Kickstarter experts. They featured over 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns, and if you have a technology or design campaign, it is a great platform to generate awareness and get backers. You can check them out at thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we have a two-time Kickstarter success on the show. His most recent project for Orb One, a stovetop coffee maker, has recently hit the 300K milestone on Kickstarter, more than 2,000 backers, and still a ton of time to go. And he's also had another successful campaign. A lot of cool stuff. It's coming up right now. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi.
Hey man, dude, you've had some great success here. Are you the design brains behind this, or what's sort of your role with the project here?
Yeah, it's, so the Crucialito is the name of the business, and it's a small design practice and production studio. Most of our work are client projects or collaborations with chefs or brands on designing kind of like specific experiential tableware or, specific cooking tools. And so in the case of Orb One, it's a little bit of a detour because there is no client, and it's not really translating a client project into a product. It really started with kind of my growing obsession with coffee.
I have that obsession too.
And just kind of tinkering away on the side when I would have some time to spare. And obviously having the studio and the production facility, I'm able to prototype and test ideas. And so it's been kind of 10 years, of kind of testing and development of, going down a lot of different roads in terms of coffee infusions.
So your background is as a product designer.
Well, it's more complicated than that, but that's, the design studio now has existed for 23 years. But my background's actually, I'm a blacksmith by training, so I'm a metalsmith.
Interesting.
I grew up in Eastern Europe in the Czech Republic, where I worked at a castle restoring historical metalworks. After that, I went on and studied natural materials design, which was looking at traditional techniques, technologies, and materials and translating them, finding new language for them, finding new uses for them. And after that, I studied conceptual art. So it's a little bit of a complex way of, it's not really a standard design.
Sounds like the background to like a Ken Follett novel, living in a castle, right? Designing cool stuff, working on artwork. That's really neat. So I guess I kind of want to ask you, one of my first questions for you is like, you obviously have a lot of creativity and you're able to execute upon that and bring it into the real world. When you were just getting first started with this product, like how early stage did that look? Like, did you have foam core modeling? Did you try stuff out with like an existing coffee maker? What did your initial like prototypes kind of look like?
Yeah, so a lot of it was testing existing systems, looking at filtration, looking at sedimentation, and measuring the results, seeing what's consistent, what's not consistent. And then we started with very crude metal models because pressure is a big part of the equation when it comes to Orb One. So it's difficult to test with foam core. So a lot of the early development already was happening in metal, like basic metal forms and enclosures.
And that was to kind of test out a bit of the functionality, right? And kind of the look and the feel as well, a little.
Yeah, more the functionality, the look and feel came once we established the basic proportions and kind of the thermal properties of that device. Then we could kind of look at the form and try to design that to be a pleasant object, to be a nice interaction for the user.
When you're thinking about that, then do you have to get like an engineer involved with the thermal properties and stuff? Or are you just like researching online and like figuring this out yourself kind of?
Well, I've worked on designing cookware before for client on as client projects. So I have some experience working on pots and pans and also heat sources and thermal conductivity of materials and the relationships that are beneficial or they're also detrimental to certain cooking processes. Mm-hmm. So in this case, it's obviously my background, like as I mentioned, is in the metals. So metal properties and metal processing is something that I had to study in my early days. So this is not unfamiliar territory for me. So, combining kind of the knowledge of the cookware manufacturing processes, then to cookware applications, and then the metal manufacturing, it was all handled internally, more or less. We had to learn. Yep.
Was it kind of that you wanted to solve a problem for yourself or you didn't like what was out there? Like, when did you begin to really think about the problem and a possible other solution?
Yeah, I think it's more the not liking what's out there. There are great coffee makers in the world and lots of them. But in kind of the way in my lifestyle and the way I operate, I wasn't finding one that satisfied me both as an object in terms of interaction and the quality of the coffee of my morning experience.
Yeah.
And so I kind of set out to see if I can change this, if I can come up with a solution that would kind of marry these two things, make an object that I want to interact with and I can afford to buy. And then also that yields a really, really good coffee.
And this is the first product that you've really brought to market. Is that right?
It's not. We've actually designed, or we brought, and I'm using plural because it's more than just me in the studio.
Okay.
So I'm in the design direction position, but there's, it's a team of 4 people that works on these projects. So we have other products that we've brought to the market, but they're much more conventional tableware. And then I guess the first Kickstarter, you would consider that it started as a client project and kind of evolved into a product that's lived a life of its own since the Kickstarter in 2012.
I'm sure you have like lots and lots of ideas all the time. Do you think there's any reason that this one really stuck with you for so long and then you eventually executed on it?
Well, I think the biggest reason is that I simply didn't find the tool that I was looking for. I oftentimes kind of go through, like there's a decent churn of ideas going through one's head. Sometimes we would start mocking a project up, prototyping it, testing, and then we would find a product that already fills that gap really well. And, then we kind of abandon the project. In the case of Stovetop Coffee, I just wasn't finding a solution out there that really filled that void for me. It felt like a valid pursuit.
Definitely. So I want to get into some of the lessons you've learned, but before we do, what would you say you're most proud about with this one that you've created? Because it does look really cool. It looks like it works very well. You can kind of maybe describe it a bit for the listeners. What are you most proud of when it comes to the designing of this product and what you like about it?
I think I managed to find a space that is, there's nothing particularly innovative about the product itself, right? Like there's nothing, we didn't invent a new technology. It's just combining everything that we already know and trying to anchor, like translate some variables into constants. So the whole process is easier to control. So I guess maybe to describe the coffee maker a little bit, which is really hard to do without visuals, at least even for me, is it's a stovetop coffee maker with a lower boiler chamber, which is made out of stainless steel, with a small heatsink that doubles as a shower head, which channels the water and cools it at the same time before it enters a coffee chamber, and then it spills out of the coffee chamber back down into a top section of the vessel, which is where you would dispense the coffee from. So they pour it out.
Yeah. So like a traditional coffee maker, you heat up the water, you pour it into the thing, it does its job, and you have coffee. With this, it seems like it's almost two in one a bit, that process.
Yeah, and that was one of the goals that I set out. So I kind of set out this, I wanted it to be a single device. I wanted it to be easy to clean, and I wanted it to be versatile. And the versatility is the one thing that I really haven't found, definitely not in stovetop coffee makers, because usually those tend to be kind of a one-trick pony. They're excellent, they're beautiful stovetop espresso machines. There's traditional mocha pots. There are various types of percolators. But what I was really looking for was a solution that would give me a little bit of versatility and let me brew coffee where the yield brew ratio is, will vary from 1 to 2 of espresso to 1 to 16, which is kind of like a drip range. So, and anything in between. And just because I like to change my coffee up all the time, and I really don't want to have multiple devices that keep switching around.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, I mean, I think a lot of product designers are super talented, but you guys also seem to have the marketing side handled pretty well, right? What was it like when it came to preparing for this Kickstarter campaign? Were you warming up your existing backers? Were you doing any kind of pre-launch activities? Like, how did you manage to, raise so much in such a short period of time?
Well, with the first Kickstarter, I learned a lesson that if you have a mailing list, you want to get everybody a notice so they know something's coming and they jump on board early if the project interests them. We tried to replicate that, do the same thing with the coffee, where we have a list of, a mailing list of people who are interested in what we do and want to know about new projects. So we essentially, a few days before the project launch, let them know there's a Kickstarter coming out for a product that's somewhat different from everything else we've done. And if it interests you, we'll let you know when it goes live and you can join us and become part of that community. And it seemed to work pretty well. So we got, several hundred people right off the bat. And then it gets a little bit the ball, the snowball rolling once you get the initial bump. We were also lucky enough to be featured by Kickstarter in their projects we love on their projects we love list, and then in one of their emails to backers that selected projects that kind of rethink existing spaces, which the stovetop coffee maker is one of those areas where there just hasn't been a lot of new developments. Right. So I think that really helped increase the numbers. But definitely leveraging the client list that we already have was useful.
When it came to your first campaign here, I know you mentioned having more takeaways from that one possibly than this one because you're in the middle of this one, right?
Right.
With the first campaign, like, was that a big surprise to you? Did you expect to hit 700K plus? Like, walk me through that.
Yeah, no. So I that was a big lesson in how not to manage backer experience or backer expectations, because I really didn't think past, I set the goal based on what we needed to raise the tooling cost and an initial small run of, let's say, 500 units. And like I said, I tend to be a half empty glass half empty kind of guy. And so for me to do double that would have been a fantastic success. I set everything up to like to that level. Like I didn't really discuss with, with our OEM, with the manufacturer, what it would be to, if how would it look if we really exceeded the expectations, more than 2 times and all that stuff. So I wasn't really prepared for it to go kind of 20 times the goal. And it was a series of kind of phone calls where, after first day we raised, I don't know, I think $50,000-$60,000. I called the factory and I'm like, okay, we probably need to increase the order. So we'll do twice as much. And they're like, okay. And then the next day it kind of doubled again. And I called them back. I'm like, well, maybe we should double it again. And it continued at this rate. So after 4 or 5 days, I called them like, maybe I just shouldn't come. Like maybe we should just expect we're gonna do 10 times what I originally planned for. And they're like, wait, well, that's okay. We love that, but we cannot, like before you were a small project that we would slot in between our major production runs, but now you have become this major production run, and we don't have those man hours. We can't push the project out fast enough on the original time at
the time scale, yeah.
Time scale that was originally planned. So all of a sudden it got bumped 4 or 5 months down the road because the original plan was really to slot this small number of units very quickly and be nimble. But now all of a sudden it became very big, and it meant immediately like a 6-month delay, which was very, that was a very unpleasant news to break to backers. That were so successful that the original plan will work for a tiny fraction of backers, but most of them will have to wait longer. That was kind of a big bummer, unpleasant lesson of too much success or success you didn't plan for.
If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillment, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. It basically increased the lead time, right, for getting the product the way you want it.
Yeah, that was the primary implication there. So to avoid that with the Orb One, we capped the number of rewards, which never crossed my mind with the portal originally that's even possible to be that successful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, and obviously that affects a bit of the brand and the relationship you build with the customer. So, I mean, that definitely sucks. When it comes to that first campaign, like, where were people discovering you from? Where is it from Kickstarter itself? Did you get on any news outlets? Like, how did people find out about it?
Yeah, so in case of the first campaign, it was conventional press. It was Wired Magazine, Fast Company, New York Times that featured the design, and that generated a lot of traffic and a lot of backing. I think now traditional media does not really feature Kickstarter projects anymore, so I don't really expect that to have any real impact. So it's a little bit more grassroots now, it feels like to me. Yeah, a little bit less kind of the media attention, focus, spotlight kind of effect.
When it comes to that, the first project, you finally eventually get your product shipped and stuff like that. What does that feel like to you when you can finally like have people around the world own your product? It's almost like it becomes a part of their life, and like a part of their story, and like they remember this product that they use and like this tea tumbler that they love, right? What does that kind of feel like for you as a creator?
It was a very different feeling than the types of projects I worked on before that tend to be kind of fine dining, limited edition, very precious objects, where in this case, it was people using it at home. That's probably where the Orb One really started, was the moment when we shipped all these products out and all of a sudden there were 10,000 people who had the infuser. And you kind of see that it's an object that can live. Yeah. The porthole is, it's kind of like, it's a different type of a product. It's a different feel. Absolutely. That, when people start to use them at home and give you your feedback, give you other ideas. And also you learn very quickly that things you've taken for granted are not perceived that way, which is kind of the drawback of the like bigger success or shipping, large numbers of units to large numbers of people. that you have to modify the way you think about even instructions and how the way people take product out of the box and all that stuff. It was a very valuable lesson in that sense. But the fact that it's something that's used widely, that not in a controlled environment, but in people's homes, yeah, it's a completely different kind of
Ball game,
feedback.
yeah.
That yeah.
Different ball game. Having this ability with your team to be able to make products, is there any reason that you choose to execute on the ideas of others instead of like trying to build out an e-commerce store around the porthole or around this new product?
Well, like we still work on our collaborations. It's not really other. So it's still, I'd still consider it our product. It's more that it's not something that's public facing or that's not distributed in a large volume. I think there's a little bit of a shift in the way I think about it and the rest of the team thinks about it recently, because with the pandemic, the restaurant world has been decimated, and for us it meant that a lot of our projects disappeared, and we had to think like, okay, if we want to survive, we need to kind of shift our focus a little bit and give more attention to products that have kind of broader appeal. Like the reason to work on these collaborations is that they're super interesting. They're fascinating projects where we learn a ton about food, about interactions with food. So I think they're very valuable, very to us. But yeah, the fact that they don't always translate into a product that can be leveraged and developed into it's like full on product or a consumer facing brand is something that we're looking at changing now.
What role has Facebook ads played in your campaign? Because this is kind of like a newer thing, obviously in the last 2 years, I'd say, where more and more companies are running e-commerce Facebook ads. Are you guys doing anything like that to promote it?
Not right now. I mean, we've actually, since that's one big difference from the previous campaign from 8 years ago, we got bombarded by marketers as soon as the project launched, offering us to kind of like market the product on social media. And it's really hard to navigate. It's really hard to figure out what might work, what might not work. So we're not actually doing it. The cost of those ads, it seems really high. So it's more suited probably for a company that has huge margins or that sells high margin products, which is not really the case with the Orb One, because we're trying to walk the line of keeping it affordable but high quality at the same time. And it comes at the expense of margins. So it's a product that's not likely to find a way into the retail world because the margins just won't work there. And it's the same for social media marketing, because once you start adding up the Kickstarter fee, the credit card processing fees, the agency fees, and then the social media marketing fees, all of a sudden you've eaten up half of your raise.
Totally. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. With this new one, have you thought through the logistical supply chain differently, learning from your previous experience? Like, how are you navigating that with the new one?
The Orb One, our goal is to bring as many steps in the process in-house as possible. Because the one big lesson with the porthole was that you cannot control if you're working with original equipment manufacturers that are taking on the entire manufacturing process. You're losing a little bit of control. You're also dealing with like kind of spikes in deliveries or slowing down of deliveries. That it all works in, at least for this type of a project that we're working on, the type of technology that we're using there. It was a little bit like series of shockwaves, and you have to commit to like multi-year production schedules and pay deposits, all this stuff. It gets quite expensive. Whereas the Orb One, we're really looking to outsource as little as we can, which there are components like the pulse drill filter that we're working with a company in Switzerland that we've developed a technique to cost effectively pulse drill tiny holes in stainless steel to filter the coffee. So we have to outsource that part. Then there is like a pressure release valve, which is made by a company in Italy. That's a fairly standard product that we're not going to be hitting volumes where it would make sense to do it in-house. But everything else, we're trying to kind of walk the line of at least handling the finishing operations and be able to pace the steps in the process and control the flow a little bit better. Now, it's my background being in metals and metalsmithing and machining, I'm fairly comfortable with this, with all these processes, and it's designed to be a relatively straightforward operation. So that's kind of the one big difference, is that we're trying to design so it's more of a fluid and more controlled operation where we can if this project really succeeds and continues to live on beyond the Kickstarter a lot, then we can add a camping version. We can add a double size version, and use the minute it's our equipment and we can do it on our own equipment. It's a whole different story.
So, I mean, I think a lot of people would look at some of your successes here and almost like look at it with a sense of awe, like the way that you've been able to build a team, the marketing you have, the results you're getting. It's pretty admirable. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, for a lot of the people in the audience that are just now working on a product idea, what do you think are some of those first steps? Like, obviously, I would think about like sketching out different views of the product, maybe trying to get, you seem like you went straight to the functional model over the look and feel kind of a model. What do you think are some of the initial steps someone should take to get their idea further along?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be completely different depending on the type of product and the level of experience they have. Like for me, I've been, as I said, the studio is 23 years old. And so it's not, we've been doing this for a while, and we can rely on kind of like a pretty good stock of experience amongst the team in terms of, design, manufacturing, logistics. So there is nothing really new for us, nothing that's going to surprise us. I think if somebody's new to it, they should probably try to identify what they're not familiar with and go on, do a deep dive and drill really as deep as they can into understanding how that world works. Because that's, I think, the biggest fear I would have is our surprises. They're never good. Like so
yeah.
It's, I think just kind of critically looking at one's own skill set and decide which part of it do I need to outsource. And like I said, like now at Crucial, we have a team of people, and we can kind of distribute the responsibilities, and we can take the product from conception to delivery all the way. But for most people starting out, it's probably not the case.
Identify what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just kind of realistically assess your abilities. It's in terms of the ability to deliver the project. In terms of the concept development, again, it's for us, because it's, we do this on a daily basis for, on other projects. It's not really, we can rely on a lot of knowns. But I think for other people who don't have that experience, who have maybe taken a design class, they probably, it's.
Yeah, identifying definitely the unknowns there. When someone comes to you and is like, hey, I have an idea for a product and I want your firm to make it, Martin, what are some of the common questions you usually ask them? Do you ask them about like the functionality? Do you ask them about like, have they thought out the design yet? What kind of questions do you ask them?
So we don't take on projects of this type. We actually take on projects where people come with a question, like how can we do A or B? But not, like if people have an idea of what the solution should be, then they should probably go to an agency with a manufacturing facility in-house or something like that. Like we usually don't take on projects where there's nothing to solve. I think our strength is looking critically, at the challenge, at the problem, ask questions about what are the key ideas, and then start from there. So usually I would ask people, are you willing to close your eyes, hold my hand, and jump off a cliff? If people say no, then we don't take the project.
Yeah, because they're relying on you to find the best way to do these things and to solve these problems.
Yeah, and if it's not, like there are going to be more cost-effective ways. If you have an idea for a product and it's very defined, there are better resources to use than something that we do. So it's for us, it really is going from the beginning all the way to the end when it comes to just kind of taking an existing idea and translating into a product that's, there are agencies, there are companies out there that focus on this.
Yeah. I just have one or two more questions for you. One is really quick. Are there any tools that you like using when it comes to prototyping a product, like CAD or SketchUp, sketching tools or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we usually, it's kind of the standard setup. We use Rhino for modeling. It's a surfacing, software. So it's for 3D modeling. We use Rhino. We bring it into Fusion, the models for generating toolpaths for CNCs. And in most cases, we end up working on the prototypes on a CNC mill or a lathe. So those are kind of the standard tools for us to go from point A to point B. We there's a good amount of writing and talking. Like I think design process is largely semantic. You wanna understand the problems, and then you want to be able to answer the questions that come up. Once you've done that, then you can like kind of go, and it's like everybody has a slightly different process, so even within our team, like we all work slightly differently. So, for me, I don't sketch to communicate. I sketch to think through stuff. So I generate tons of, paper with weird, incomprehensible sketches. Mm-hmm. Whereas other people have sketched to communicate, and they sketch, in a more aestheticized way. And then once the idea is clearly articulated, as in what the solution should be, usually then the next step is figuring out the physical constraints and volumes and relationships. So in some cases it might be math. Like in the case of Orb One, it started with calculating thermal capacity of materials and figuring out how to drop water temperature by 5 degrees Celsius within a short distance. But in other cases, it might just be figuring out what a volume needs to be, and then start to work in 3D, whether it's cutting a piece of foam or actually modeling it. Right now, that depends. It's different for everyone.
My last question for you is, when you're beginning to think about manufacturing, is that from like day one, you're thinking about the materials, the costs, where we would get it manufactured, or is that like a process that comes in towards the end of the prototype?
You think about it somewhat inactively from the get-go, because in our case, like we have the experience, we know what's possible, what's not possible. So you kind of instinctively drive it towards the manufacturable. So it's definitely a part of the initial conversation, but it's in the back of your mind. It's not really something you're fully focused on, but I don't think you can really free yourself from it. Because if you've ever, and I think every designer at some point has designed something that was not really easy to manufacture. And you kind of, it's like your biggest fear is to spend all this time on something and then get to a point where you learn that your instincts were wrong, or you were in a void. So I think once you've learned that lesson, you probably never get rid of this, like what's the manufacturability aspect, involved here. You never really get that out of your mind.
Well said. Really, really interesting wealth of knowledge, man. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all of this info. Where can people go and learn more about the Kickstarter and look into your craftsmanship, with this product you've created?
The studio's website is crucialdetail.com. Crucial Detail is the name of the business, where there are other examples of our work, or there is still the ongoing Kickstarter, which is called Orb One. It's a Stovetop Coffeemaker. So if people search for Orb One on Kickstarter, they'll find our current project there.
Great. Martin, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it, and good luck with your remaining 30 days here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. I hope that you took some time to take some notes on today's episode, which I think really in-depth, super good. Sometimes I'm just blown away by the fact that even as a job, I get to interview these types of people. Like, it's so cool to me. But it's one of the reasons why I love coming to work every day. The other day I was talking with someone, they were like, oh, you're going to be great. It's going to be amazing when you retire, and you're going to be able to relax and like all this kind of stuff you look forward to when you retire. And I'm like, man, I'm never going to retire. It's insane that, to me, that idea even enters your head. Like, maybe it's because I have like the entrepreneurial bug, or whatever you want to call it, the creator bug. I love doing new stuff, and I love doing it as well within like this genre of crowdfunding. I love teaching. I love sharing useful things that can help you propel your career and can help propel your upcoming project. Like, it's so cool to me, and the fact I get to even interview some really great creators is a massive perk, as well as I get to keep my fingers on the pulse, right, when it comes to Kickstarter and crowdfunding. So I'm learning stuff all the time, and my entire life I've tried to really document it and like keep aware of the things that aren't working and the things that are. And I don't know if like it's fair to say, but like I kind of think of myself almost as like a researcher or as like a scientist or something like that, where I'm just trying to uncover what's working. Why is it working, right? What is the psychology behind it? How can we document that and share that in a formula or some kind of a blueprint that other people can use, and they can be more successful with their campaigns? That's like my entire ethos, or I don't know what you would say, my mission. So this is kind of one of the reasons why I started the mastermind in general, is I wanted to give you access to more of that stuff, which obviously requires more hand-holding and more support to help. But also, it's always been, I think, one of my hallmarks of my brand to build community. So I started KickstarterForum.org, which was one of the first communities in this industry, along with crowdfundingforum.com. And KickstarterForum.org grew to over 10,000 members. And I was really one of the first pioneers of that site, as well as different Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups back in the day, Google Plus. I had a massive Google Plus group when that was still a thing with Kickstarter and crowdfunding. Community has also been a major value that I share. And I think because I believe that as a community and as a team, we can do more and we can do greater things than just as an individual. Now, you might struggle to think like, how does that apply to my crowdfunding campaign? How does it apply to Kickstarter? Well, think about this. You as a creator have certain incredible qualities. You can make stuff, or you can design stuff, or you can find people who can help you do that. But there's also a lot of stuff you don't know, right? And the only way to really be successful is either to learn it, or to get around people who know it, or to hire people, right? That's really where success comes from. It's identifying the people you need in your life to be successful. Because let's be honest, if it's just you, it's not really going to go very far. You might be able to do something very individualistic or something that's very in line with what your skill set is. But let's be honest, like even if I'm a writer and I'm writing a book, well, that book has to come from somewhere. I need to work with people who can make the actual book, or to make the graphics for it, or to help me with the formatting of it, or to deliver it, right, to the customers around the world who have bought the Kickstarter launch formula. So like, there's always, you have to work within a team environment. You're always depending on other people. You're always relying on other people, and you want to make sure they're ethical and good people who can help support your mission and to help you be successful. So that's the whole reason why I created the mastermind, the sort of the insider community within my community, so that we can provide that, so that we can make sure that we set you up right, and that you do have access to stuff that is credible and that does work for you, as well as, get your questions answered, all that kind of stuff with my weekly workshop. So this also gets one-on-one coaching with me as well. So that being said, go and check out crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That link again, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That link will take you. You can learn more about this community that I'm building, but that's crowdcrux.com/mastermind. Hope you enjoyed today's class and that you took away a lot out of today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Leave a review on iTunes, please. Or if you're listening to this on another platform, it'd be great if you could say something nice there. I appreciate that so much, and I'll see you next time.